Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from October 2nd, 2021. I'm recording this on April 1st, 2022. I can promise you all the information I'm going to give you here is on the level. There's no April Fool's jokes in this particular video because you guys aren't going to watch it till the second anyway. So, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Those are the two lists we use. They each put out 10 books each week. We look at those 10 books and see what we can learn about how the market was moving and changing 6 months ago, what made these books hot, and what they've done since to let you know what books give you a better idea of what things you should be patient on, what books you maybe should chase in the moment. And so this week we got 20 books, so there were no overlap between the two lists. It doesn't happen too often. It does happen occasionally, but there was no overlap this week between the two lists. So without further ado, let's dig into this list and see if we can learn anything. First up, we have New Gen, number 1. And this comic hit the list because supposedly there's an animated series coming, and Henry Rollins was attached to work on it, and suddenly this $5, $10, $15 book became a $50 to $75 book. Well, now 6 months later, there's been no new information, and it's a $5 to $15 book with only 4 sales. The 4 sales is because listings are still much higher, but the book is not selling for anything more than 5 to 15. I thought this would be a trap. This was actually a dumpster fire. This was a terrible spec choice if you went after it at $50 to $75. I don't know why Henry Rollins moved the needle that much, but he did. Next, we have Sandman, number 1. This was a big book no matter what, but this hit the list because the teaser trailer dropped for the show. I actually thought we were supposed to have the show by now. Did I miss it coming out? I feel like maybe I did, but back then, raw copies were sitting at $250. A 9.8 was going for $1,500. Now, a raw copy will cost you $150 to $250, so it's down a little bit on the raw side. 9.8 is going to cost you $1,000 to $1,200. So this is backed up a little bit. Just a very typical I'll be back. We haven't had any news related to the show recently. My guess is that it's not out yet. Should be out, I would think, at any time, but I don't actually know what the date is on this. But my guess is we'll get a little bit of a bump again when the show does actually come out, or I completely missed it, which I guess is possible. Next, we have Blip, number 1. Second week in a row, this first appearance of Mario and Donkey Kong in a comic, in a magazine, hit the list. Back then, raw copies were going for $180. 9.8 hit $1,800 with cast announced for the Mario animated movie. The Chris Pratt and other people that were going to be in this, the announcement came, caused this book to jump. Now it's still on the raw side of $50 to $200 book, so kind of in the same range, definitely down a little bit, but no recent 9.8 sales, so I can't really judge that. There just haven't been any. 9.4s are basically the highest thing that's sold recently at $4 to $450. So, like we talked about last week, this book has definitely been an I'll be back on the raw side, and yeah, not sure. My guess is the 9.8s are probably still in the same range, just hard to tell. Next, we have Babylon 5. We had a bunch of show, movie-related stuff this week, and this is hit the list because there's a series reboot supposedly coming to the CW. If I've learned anything over the years is that CW spec books don't tend to last. At least they don't on the DC side. We'll see if they do for Babylon 5, but this book only actually jumped up to $8. 9.8 was $150. Hit the list because there was a bunch of sales. This was one of those Tom books where there's 1,000 plus increase in sales. It's still a $5 to $15 book. 9.8, only 2 recent sales, one for $36, one for $100. So yeah, this has been steady on the raw side, I guess. $5 to $15, depending on shipping, that kind of thing. Definitely an I'll be back. No reason to rush out and get this. And my guess is the show, when it actually comes out, won't move this book very much either. Next, we have Department H, number 1, and this hit the list because there's a director attached to this and a Netflix show coming. So that's why this hit the list. Raw copies jumped up to 15, and 9.8 went for 73. No recent 9.8 sales, but raw copies are down 5 to 15 now. So it's another I'll be back. Basically 15 still the high end on this book. But you can do better. And yeah, we'll see if we actually get a show anytime soon out of this. Netflix announcements, like anything else, could be a couple years from when they announce it to when it actually comes out. And they just were catching a director. Doesn't mean they probably don't have final scripts and cast and all that kind of stuff yet. And our last show-related or option-related book this week is Techworld #1. Another animated show and multimedia experience was supposedly coming. So this book jumped up to $10 with the whole big increase in sales. 9.8 went for $160. And it's now $1 to $8 book. 9.8 going 45 to 60. Yeah, this is if it can be, if a $10 raw book can be a trap, this probably was. I put it as an I'll be back just because, yeah, it didn't really move down that much. But yeah, no real reason to go after this book. With that, we're going to move into covers, and we got a bunch of covers this week. Like we had 6 books related to option or show news. We got 8 books related to covers. First up, we have Gun Honey #1, the Adam Hughes variant. This is not the Virgin variant. There's a couple other, there's a third print of this or whatever. There's a couple different variations of this. This is the first print, trade dress. It was up to $10 to $15 right after release. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, 9.8, 40 to 80. Sexy Adam Hughes cover, but I don't know that the series has really amounted to much. I thought this one might be enough, but really I think people are more chasing the Virgin version of this instead of this trade dress. So this turned into another I'll be back. Next, we have Night of the Cadillacs #1. This 1 in 25 Laurent Jacques cover was going for 50 plus. Typically, if it doesn't make triple, what do I say? It's going to end up between ratio and double. And it's now a $30 to $40 book. I actually thought this might be a trap because I didn't get the appeal of the cover. I didn't think it was that great a cover, but it turned into just the standard I'll be back on this. So on this book, marginally a trap, dropping down to 35 from 50 plus. But yeah, definitely down quite a bit, but very typical for a 1 in 25 that doesn't make triple ratio is really what we're looking at here. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man 611, this second print of this popular Scotty Young cover. The difference between the first print and the second print is the first print, there's no words and a little thought bubble coming from Deadpool. And in the second print, there's actually like words in it. He's actually talking. This raws of this were going for $100 back then. Now they're $50 to $100, so the high end still will hit 100. 9.8 only goes for $175. Little surprised that it's actually that cheap at $100 on a $50 to $100 raw book. But that's kind of where it's at. I thought this one might be worth it. I was wrong. This one has actually backed up as well. This is another I'll be back. Next, so more covers still going. We got Transformers Halloween Special #1. This Livio Romadelli, 1 in 10. Had a bunch of people going after it. It was up to double ratio at $30, or triple ratio, excuse me, at $30. But these Halloween holiday variants tend to not do as well as even other variants in terms of lasting long term as you move away from something. And this has been the case. It is now at ratio at $10, and that's only one sale. Another one where the listings are still a little bit higher, but yeah, just one sale on this thing. This definitely turned into a trap. Nobody was really interested in it once you got away from the initial in the Halloween season. Maybe around Halloween, people might come back to it or something, but I kind of doubt it. Next, we have Catwoman #35, The Kill Nguyen. NGU, I don't know exactly how you pronounce that. 1 in 25. This 1 in 25 was going for 50 to 60. Usually means not quite triple ratio. It usually means it's going to back up. If it gets a triple, it usually stays pretty steady. This one actually went up. It actually ended up making it to triple ratio at 75 to 80 is where it's at now, and it's been sitting pretty steady there for the last several months. This is before the Sozumaki took over on the incentives, but this wanted poster incentive has definitely managed to actually climb a value and is holding really strong at about triple ratio. So this turned into a worth it for sure if you went after this one. our next 1 in 25, we still got more covers. We got what, 4 more covers still. Something is Killing the Children, number 20, the Valerio Shutti, 1 in 25, was going for 40. Didn't make double. Didn't even make double. Usually means ratio or below. In this case, it actually is still setting about ratio to double ratio at 20 to 50. 9.8 going for 50 to 100. So I call this pretty steady because a lot of the sales are in that $35, $40 range. Although the ends are 50 and 20. So still turned into a bit of an I'll be back because you can get it for a little bit less. Like I said, this is a buck in the rule a little bit. Did not back us up as much for one that didn't make double ratio as you would typically see, but it definitely could be gotten for less money than that $40 it was last time. All right, let's see. We got a little further here. We got Ironheart, number 1, the Jen Bartel 1 in 50. You could argue this is an MCU book or whatever, but this there wasn't any particular news around there. Just this book was taken off from her first Ironheart solo series. This Bartel 1 in 50. 9.8 went for $825, which was a new high, and then it sold for $1,200. So that's why they put it on the list. There was 2 sales that had jumped this book way up in the eyes of everyone. Now raw copies of this 1 in 50 are going for $130 to $300, a really pretty wide range on this for how pretty high grade copies. 9.8 sitting around 1,000. This is another one I called steady and worth it. Obviously, the one sale was higher. The one sale was lower on the 9.8 side. But the raw copies have been kind of creeping up. You could argue maybe I'll be back, but it's right in that range. They're pretty steady overall and probably worth it for the most part. If you pay $12, my guess is when she appears, you'll be able to get it out of it at that point for sure. So, next we have Invincible number 1, the Tyler Kirkham, variant for the Whatnot reprint. So Whatnot has done several of these now. They reprinted this one. There's one with Omni-Man. There's one with Adam Eve. These have been very popular coming from Whatnot. The print runs aren't really that small for like a store exclusive. They're fairly typical. A little bit on the small side. People really love these. This trade dress version, there's a couple different versions. This trade dress version was going for $400 raw back then, right after it was kind of hitting the market. Now it's sitting at $200 to $300. 9.8 would cost you about $7. So this definitely turned into an I'll be back marginal trap at $200 to $300 from a $400 raw book. So definitely backed up. I probably should have written this down as trap now that I think about it as I'm looking at it now, but definitely backed up significantly, but still going for really huge values when you think about what it is, that it's a store exclusive reprint. Cool covers, although I will say he's now done 3-4 different versions of this. He's now done a Punisher one, and it's like, okay, like, we get it. I don't want this to become another one of those that we see like 50 different characters in the same kind of thing, but we probably are going to. It definitely like makes it less attractive to me that they continue to do more and more and more of these. We'll see. Next we have Swordmaster number 1. This is finally to our last cover. This is the Hanning 1 in 50. This is the origin first solo title of Swordmaster, and this was basically on rumors that he was going to take over as the new Iron Fist. We now know here just a month or so ago that actually happened, so he is currently Iron Fist at the moment. So obviously this book that was $75 back then is now $125 to $225 for a raw copy. This one has jumped way up. It's been straight cash over the 6 months because this did come to fruition. 9.8 will cost you $500 to $700. So never really read Iron Fist, so I haven't been reading this particular version either. I'm curious what people think of this transition. Are people enjoying it or not? Let me know in the comments if you're reading it. I'm curious, but like I said, neither Iron Fist nor Swordmaster have been characters on my radar, so I am curious what people think, though. With that, we're going to move into 2 Comic Buzz books before we finally jump over to MCU. Still got 5 books left to talk about. First up is Reptile, number 1. This is the first appearance of Eva, plus also the first solo series of Reptile. This book was going for $9, 9.8 was going for $45, based on the fact that Eva was going to appear on Eva was going to appear on the a future cover of a Marvel Voices issue. That seemed to be why they were talking about it. So she was going to be on a variant, so people were going back for her first appearance. Seems kind of thin, but they were doing it. But it was only a $9 book. That's another one of those Tom books. The 9.8 was only going for $45. It was mainly being driven by just the number of sales. Now raw copies will cost you $2 to $15. 9.8 is up to $100, but there's only a couple of those sales, so that's not that surprising for a first appearance. Pretty rare to find a first appearance for $45. So it's been pretty steady on the raw side, which is the vast majority of the sales. A little bit of an I'll be back. You could do better than the craziness, or there was no reason to chase the craziness, I guess. Not that it was really crazy. It just, yeah, like when everyone was buying, it didn't matter if you waited or not. So, next we have Reptile number 1. This is the Souza 1 in 25. Same reason for hitting the list. This one was doing a little better, though. Raw copies of this were up to 50. And now they're setting 40 to 75, with most of the sales in that 40 to 55 range. So I called this one also steady but worth it, because there are a few sales, 55, 60, all the way up to 75. So I called this one pretty much worth it, but overall just steady. We'll see. I guess this book has probably already come out. If they was on a future variant, usually solicitations are like 3 months. So this has probably already happened, but didn't move the needle when it happened. So we'll see if there's any future to this Eva character. With that, we have 3 books left, and they're all MCU related. So that's pretty rare that we've had this many books, and we're just not getting to the MCU. I mean, you could argue maybe Ironheart was MCU, but first up we have Fantastic Four number 358, the first appearance of Pybok the Power Scroll, and this is pure unadulterated. Okay, there's a Secret Invasion series coming. What scrolls can we get a first book on? It's really what was driving this. Back then it jumped up to $10 with a huge bump in sales. A 9.8 back then was only $130, but yeah, so that was, it was moving. Now it's a $1 to $15 book, literally $1 to $15. There definitely were some $1 sales. But 9.8 is already up to $350, which is a huge jump, but there's only 2 of those sales, so it's hard to really say that's really where the market is if several of them hit the market. So we're going to focus on the raw side, and this has been pretty steady, a bit of an I'll be back. Again, it was so low to start with, $10, that wasn't much place for it to go down, but it did, but it's been fairly steady. So, next we have Gamora number 1, her first solo title, which didn't happen until 2016, which seems odd, but that's kind of the same thing with Nebula we talked about last week. And this has to do with James Gunn making comments about that Guardians 3 was going to be focused on Gamora and Nebula. We know this week they announced that it had wrapped shooting. So he's working on finishing up, and he gave a teaser, I think even today, that something on Monday. We were going to get a little tease on Monday from Guardians 3, so that should be interesting. But back then, her first solo title was up to a $15 book for this A cover. 9.8 was up to $50, and now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8, $40 to $50. So you can argue this one's a down and an I'll be back versus steady, down just a little bit. But yeah, I'm curious. I'm looking forward to Guardians 3. James Gunn has done a really great job on Guardians, did a great job on Suicide Squad, so I'm down with more James Gunn. Did a great job on Peacemaker, if you haven't watched that, the show. So next, we have Avengers number 257, the first appearance of Nebula. I do wonder if I contributed to this. Maybe one of the first times I contributed to a spike, because I talked about the fact, I doubt it, because last week where everybody was jumping on her first solo title, and I commented then boy, her first appearance isn't really going for very much. It did get hot the next week. Of course, it could have just been the Guardians news. I probably didn't have anything to do with it. But raw copies back then were all the way up to $45 for the first appearance of Nebula. You think about what we paid for the first appearance of a character like Miss Marvel or Riri or some of these modern characters, and Nebula's only at $45. 9.8 was only $5.25, and that was with buzz and news and stuff. And now raw copies of her first appearance are $30 to $70, so they've been pretty steady. You could argue worth it maybe versus I'll Be Back, but it's been, you know, pretty much through that whole range. 9.8s though are down to like 350. So yeah, that's definitely backed up, but not many sales on those either way, because the vast majority of sales are raw. Not a ton of people have even slabbed the first appearance of Nebula appears. So that is all 20 books. We got through it. I had to boot the dog out, but we got through it. A ton of covers, a ton of options / TV movie news this week. Just a little bit of MCU here at the end. We had a bunch of books that were fairly steady, or just slightly down and in that range. Had a couple books that actually went up this week. So not as big a drop as we've been seeing, but still overall the trend is definitely down. So we'll see. We're getting fairly late in the spring. Normally by now the market's started to recover from the winter lull. We have not yet seen it this spring, so we will see as we move into April if we start getting a little more of a bounce back in the market. So with that, I will catch you guys later.